It's been 10 days since George Floyd was killed at the hands of a Minneapolis police officer. Friends and family gathered in the city Thursday to pay their final respects at a private funeral service. It's the first of several memorials that will take place in the coming days. Floyd's loved ones shared a few memories with those who attended.
It was just amazing. Everywhere you go and see people, how they cling to him. They wanted to be around him.
Like, he was this great big giant, and when he would wrap his arms around you, you would just feel like, you were, everything could just go away. Any problems you had, any concerns you had would go away. One thing about a man, keep the definition as is. Floyd, responsibility. He would stand up for his family and friends, and he's great at that. And I want you guys to know that he would stand up for any injustice everywhere. Yeah. Can y'all please say his name? Thank y'all. Oh,
Meanwhile, peaceful protests continued nationwide Thursday. Floyd's brother Terrence held a prayer service at Cadman Square in Brooklyn. Thousands of people attended, including Mayor Bill de Blasio and the city's First Lady. In California, protesters marched through downtown Los Angeles. They gathered at an intersection patrolled by police and the National Guard. And in Lincoln, Nebraska, demonstrators met at the site of a memorial. Video there went viral after officers joined community members to dance to the Cupid Shuffle. Meanwhile, the Attorney General says at least 51 arrests have been made for federal crimes in connection to violent clashes that have often overshadowed these largely peaceful demonstrations. Natalie Brand has the latest from Washington.
For 8 minutes and 46 seconds, lawmakers stood in silence or kneeled to honor the memory of George Floyd.
People now understand what the struggle was all about.
Congressman John Lewis and the Congressional Black Caucus are working on police reform laws in the wake of Mr. Floyd's death. The longtime civil rights leader said he has been moved to tears by protesters of all colors taking to the streets.
When I made this sign, I ran out of room.
Nikki Goodwin, one of the many demonstrators gathered near the White House this week, says this moment feels different.
This was it. I don't know why. I don't know why Eric Garner wasn't the one. I don't know why Rodney King wasn't the one. But this was the one.
While the demonstrations to call for change have remained largely peaceful, the administration is defending its move to surge security, saying violent opportunists have infiltrated some of the protests.
There are some groups that don't have a particular ideology other than anarchy. There are some groups that want to bring about a civil war, the Boogaloo group. We are dealing with, as I say, a witch's brew of a lot of different extremist organizations.
The Attorney General says foreign actors may also be inciting passions on all sides. Meanwhile, the Justice Department is conducting its own parallel investigation into the death of George Floyd.
George Floyd's death was not the first of its kind, and it exposes concerns that reach far beyond this particular case.
Attorney General Barr says his department will conduct meetings with community leaders around the country in the coming weeks to ensure George Floyd's death was not in vain.
And Natalie Brand joins us now from what looks like right outside the White House. Natalie, it looks like you're there among the protesters, and in your piece we heard from Nikki Goodwin, one of the demonstrators outside of the White House. Yeah. What did she and other protesters say about why they're there and their message to lawmakers?
Well, she says this moment feels different. This could be the tipping point. And to give you a live look at what's going on outside of the White House right now for the 7th day in a row, we have a sea of peaceful demonstrators. This gentleman, you can see him standing on the lamppost, the light. He has been leading the crowd here in a series of chants, "I love you," "Black Lives Matter." Rallying the demonstrators here who have grown in size considerably over the course of the afternoon. But they've also been on the march. They've been marching from the White House to Capitol Hill. And you could see in some of the video from earlier today, there was that exchange between a Capitol Police officer and a protester, basically saying they share the concerns and are marching on the same side. And that's what we're seeing in video clips troops right now across the country. If you look at different local coverage, you're seeing these moments of solidarity between demonstrators and some of the officers even. Really, there is a sense from young to old that this moment could be different, and they are united by this same rallying cry. They're trying to send a message to the White House and all the way down to lawmakers in Capitol Hill who are now crafting various legislation to deal with some of the issues that these marchers and demonstrators have been expressing on the streets.
Well, Natalie, speaking of the administration, we know that President Trump is standing by his decision to increase security during these protests. And earlier in the week, President Trump also said that he would deploy the military if violence continued. What's the latest from the White House?
Well, the White House continues to defend its law and order posture. We've seen the president continue to tweet law and order, and White House officials saying the security of Americans is and remains their #1 priority. But notably, they have been sticking to their strategy of surging National Guard units, but perhaps backing off the threat of using active duty military troops through the Insurrection Act. And our David Martin confirmed late this afternoon that around 700 active duty troops are now headed home. They had been on standby around Washington, D.C. However, another 800 do remain on standby. Notably, the Attorney General held a public news conference today where he spoke about what the Department of Justice has identified as extremist agitators who have been infiltrating some of the protests, and they say causing a threat to the public, a threat to law enforcement, and behind some of the violent incidents. And he also called out extremist groups across the ideological spectrum, right-wing and left-wing. And again, this is seen as a small minority of extremists, violent opportunists, as DOJ officials are calling them, who have taken advantage of some of these protests. And that's, I mean, really something that lawmakers across both sides denounce as well. But as you can see here tonight during the day, and for what we've seen, from what we've seen for days, these are largely peaceful demonstrations with people of all ages. Earlier today, we saw families, children here, and some, as you heard, really eloquent demonstrators who are just crying, calling for change, and hoping that this is finally the time to turn these protests into some actual policy. Lana.
Yes, Natalie Brand, thank you.